Hi, this is Regina Y. Favors with the personal statement assignment sheet for the personal statement lecture and, of course, the assignment. So this personal statement assignment sheet audio lecture accompanies the actual personal statement lecture, which is available on YouTube as a full lecture and as the lecture separated into individual audio slides. This assignment sheet is geared towards the first year composition instructor interested in teaching the personal statement, and simply for the purpose of gauging the reading, researching, and writing readiness of students apart from high school. I think that the personal statement lecture is appropriate also for high school students, but I teach at the community college level. And so I use this assignment, which also accompanies the annotated bibliography assignment, to get students thinking about adopting a 2-year transition plan. Because the first 2 years, we are in the mindset, or students are always in the mindset, that they are getting their basics. And they may take 3 to 4 classes. But I believe planning should be your 4th or 5th class. And not just one time a year, but every semester, because it takes some time to transfer to the next level, whatever that next level is for you. Some students go in as a sophomore, but most transfer students go in as a junior. So the personal statement lecture, in addition to this assignment sheet, gives students an opportunity to begin thinking about adopting a 2-year plan. For the first year composition instructor who might be interested in teaching the personal statement as an academic, not necessarily an essay, but as an academic writing assignment, for you, this would give you an opportunity to look at the students writing outside of the high school environment. Look at how they frame an argument, because if you are writing a personal statement to get into an institution or academic program, you essentially have to persuade them to let you in. So that means you have to frame your personal statement like an argument. And so for the first year composition instructor, this gives you an opportunity to see where they are in their writing, to see where the gaps are, how you can provide feedback, especially prior to regular composition writing assignments that will require much more task management. And so this gives you an opportunity to gauge their researching and the writing capacity, provide feedback as early as possible, and just to get students to begin thinking about and understanding that they are actually in a college writing course that is going to require them to actually do college writing. So this is the personal statement assignment sheet that accompanies the personal statement lecture, and it is primarily audience for the transfer student and first year composition instructors teaching first year composition courses. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell if you are interested in further videos. Thank you for visiting the channel. This lecture is subject to fair use. And these are the learning objectives for the composition instructor. So by the end of the lecture, composition instructors will be able to do the following. So review the personal statement lecture, research sample personal statements, research sample discipline specific personal statements, analyze a sample personal statement, teach a sample personal statement, create learning objectives, rubric, goals, and guidelines for the personal statement assignment, and then create a writing assignment for the personal statement. The most important aspect of these learning objectives is helping students to tailor their personal statements by researching those discipline-specific samples that will help them with their particular major. So if you are a nursing major, a business major, engineering major, researching using a key phrase, engineering, sample personal statement will allow that student to be able to analyze, read, analyze, and understand how to frame, how to structure, how what points to consider within their own personal statement. Of course, you want to be able to teach a sample personal statement, so that means you would need to be able to review one, look at what's going on with that personal statement, how effective it is, especially if you locate a successful sample personal statement. What makes it successful? So in the full lecture, in the personal statement lecture, we go over a sample personal statement of a electrical engineering students, and you would see on YouTube the 4 paragraphs that we analyze. And so then, of course, you want to be able to teach a sample personal statement, create the learning objectives, and then create it as a writing assignment. And we're going to go over that in this lecture. So the lecture and audience, so the personal statement assignment lecture for an exploration of, or see the personal statement assignment lecture for an exploration of different writing prompts and a discussion on developing academic, professional, and personal goals. This discussion reviews the assignment sheet for composition instructors. The lecture is appropriate for the first course and first year composition. So I usually teach English 1301, English 1302. Those are the first 2 composition courses in first year composition. So here's the sample writing assignment when you need to create the English assignment sheet for the personal statement. Consider the elements of the assignment sheet, and you can put this into 1 page. Long ago, I used to create multi-page assignment sheets, and they were just, I don't think they were confusing, but they were just too long-winded. And then I went through professional development as an instructor and was able to learn better how to create the assignment sheet so that it is focused but succinct as well. The elements of the English assignment sheet will include the following. So a topic description, purpose, learning objectives, requirements, and the rubric, length, due date, plagiarism statement, and then sources if applicable. The assignment sheet should be succinct, include in clear directions, and measure learning outcomes. So the goal of the personal statement assignment is to encourage students to adopt a 2-year transition plan for transfer to a university setting by planning and writing the personal statement. And this is something that I wish I had received instruction on. A lot of times instructors don't teach practical advice, especially in English. Don't teach the topics practically. They expect us to go to maybe a student center on campus, a career center on campus to gain that instruction. And yes, the instruction on at a student center is very valuable. But it would help if we had to write on it, not just attend a center, get a few handouts, and then maybe read those handouts at home. If we had to write on it, actually receive instruction and write on it, I think it would be much more effective. So this is why I use the personal statement in the first course and then the career plan in my second course to gauge, of course, researching and writing readiness, but also to help them understand that they are always in 2 years planning, that they are not just at the institution just to get their basics done, but they are planning for their transition in the same way that if they were at the university setting, freshman, sophomore, they would plan their transition to junior. When they are a junior, they need to plan their 2 years out of the university so that when they graduate, they have something. They have more than one option. It's nothing worse than not having options. Nothing worse than not having options, meaning that you end up taking anything because you didn't plan for anything. So that's the goal, is to help students, encourage students to adopt a 2-year transition plan. The purpose of the personal statement assignment is to gauge students' readiness for researching and writing, to assess their capacity for first-year composition writing, and to provide feedback on their ability to persuade and tailor to a specific audience. Meaning that for the personal statement, you do not just create a generic personal statement. You may start with a generic foundation, just making sure that you include main elements of a personal statement. But you would need to do extended research for the institution and the academic program to determine how to tailor it to that program, tailor it to that particular institution, tailor it to that institution's amenities. So you don't want to just pass around a generic personal statement, because what that does, it shows the student, it shows the institution that the student does not know how to research or how to tailor to a particular audience. And so that's something that you would want to teach your students. So here's your topic description. The personal statement is essentially an argument, a document within which you express your desire for admission into both the school and the major, and express your desire to learn and develop further in the field to which you have chosen. It is a type of initial pre-admissions assignment that requires you to demonstrate understanding of your special and unique qualities, explain how personal events and experiences have shaped and or influenced your goals, and logically explore your interest in the field, detailing what you have learned and the insights you have gained as a result of your involvement. The personal statement requires that you understand who you are, where you have been, where you are going, and how the educational institution might help you to accomplish your goals. Essentially, you are expected to demonstrate through writing how your involvement through work and or study has reinforced your conviction that you are well suited for the field to which you have chosen. With this in mind, you will write a personal statement based upon the annotated bibliography, the personal statement lecture, group discussion, and the writing prompt below. And so this is a standard topic description. It's a discussion opener that you might use as a composition instructor to just get students to thinking about the idea that the personal statement works like an admissions assignment. It represents your first assignment, writing assignment. You usually have to take an entrance writing exam once you have been admitted. But before you can be admitted, you have to demonstrate through your own writing that you have some clue about what you want to do, where you have been, where you want to go, what you have learned, all these different facets of you. And the personal statement gives you that opportunity to express you, express your interests, express your desires, your hopes and dreams. And so this may be something that you could use as a composition instructor to get students thinking about their unique qualities. They're outlining examples of personal events. You may call on 1 or 2 or 3 students and have a board lecture or a quick board discussion, and just take some time to outline personal events, goals, involvement, current involvement. And you could, section that off as a particular board lecture or, something like that. And then that will give them an opportunity to really begin outlining themselves. So this gives you an opportunity to do much more than just read the topic description. As soon as you finish reading it, you can then take them to the next process, which is basically outlining. And then once you have done that, then it gives you also an opportunity to think about how you could encourage group discussion. So students could basically interview themselves. They may be able to interview themselves. They may be able to just do a quick handwritten discussion and then switch papers, and each person could read the other person's paper and ask questions. And so this encourages engagement, reflection, and it also reveals any gaps in their thinking about it. Some people don't think about the next plan, the next day. Basically, they get set in their thinking about where they are in the moment, and it's hard for them to plan the next 5 minutes other than say they want to go to lunch or something like that. And so trying to get them to adopt a 2-year plan seems so far reaching. But the different ways that you can engage or help them is by encouraging group discussion, group engagement, as well as outlining. So the purpose, the learning objective is to write the transfer admissions personal statement and then synthesize ideas into a cohesive discussion. And so this is you teaching the student how to do that, right? The personal transfer admissions personal statement, synthesize ideas into a cohesive discussion. And so here's the writing prompt. You will, in terms of the student's writing prompt, you will base the development of your personal statement on answering the following writing prompt. So what is your intended major? Discuss how your interest in the subject developed, and describe any experience you have had in the field, such as volunteer work, internships, and employment, participation in student organizations and activities, what you have gained from your involvement. And most importantly, in the personal statement lecture, I actually go over an analysis of this writing prompt. But if you are teaching it, one of the most important things you want to do is recognize the question and teach the student how to understand what the question is asking. It's like you have to pose it to yourself. What does this writing prompt want me to do? And it wants you to answer your intended major. It is not asking what your intended career field is, career job. It is asking your intended major. So that's your first step, knowing what your major is. And most students, if you go around the room and you ask them what their major is, they may say accounting, or they may say business, or some may say science or something like that. And then you definitely will get some students who don't know. And long gone are the days where you could sort of not know what you want to major in and get away with that for a few years. Today is a little different because programs are becoming highly impacted and very specialized. And because technology is having a strong impact on what we learn, how we learn, and how we impact the world, you definitely want to consider adding, technology to your learning process. So what is your intended major is asking the student to actually answer that question as it is posed. It's not a question to be interpreted as something else. It is a direct question. What is your intended major? Another way that you could teach, an additional way that you can teach this prompt is to possibly circle those areas where you see certain, key phrasing. So for example, discuss and describe are two different types of words, or two different types of verbs. Discuss is having a conversation. Describe is outlining and listing. But you also want to teach the fact that there are limits. So when you say describe any experience you have had in the field, students need to remember that they've already listed all of their jobs and contributions and volunteer experiences on the resume. So the admissions committee is not looking for them to rehash that list. What they are looking for is one to two to three experiences, and then briefly summarize or explain and then evaluate those experiences. Basically, what were your duties, and then what do you think about your experience there? What did you learn? Right? I also tend to place this prompt on the board and teach from it as well. I will circle particular areas, and I will also highlight particular types of experiences. So volunteer work, internships, employment, participation in student organizations and activities, or categories, right? They are categories. And students need to make sure that they understand that these categories really, what the admissions committee is really asking for is your leadership in these categories. Volunteer, if you're just volunteering to list, that may be a start. But eventually you're going to have to take one of those positions that you volunteered for and take on a leadership role and then expand on that in a personal statement. That's something also that students need to consider and that you could also teach. You may be able to pull from your own personal experiences if you were in, say, student government, what you learned, what you realized you should have been doing, and what you would do differently if you had another chance at it again, right? I don't want to miss the point about discuss how your interest in the subject developed. Implicit in that statement is timeline, which I discussed in the personal statement lecture, that we're talking about a timeline. When did the first interest in that particular thing that you are talking about, when did that begin? And that's something that you want to teach your students to think about, to outline the timeline, that this began when. My interest in nursing, my interest in electrical engineering, and then what did you do because you were interested in? You know, electrical engineers or engineering majors have the same statement or have the same story. They took apart the radio to see how it works, or they took apart the television, right, to see how it works. They have the same kind of story. I used to teach my dolls. I used to line up my dolls, put pen and paper in front of them, and then later I graduated to the neighborhood kids and lined them up and put pen and paper in front of them and teach them something. Even the pre-med student has a story of wearing a kid stethoscope and having a little white jacket on and taking the temperature of her bears or her mother and father. They all have a story. They all have a timeline, and that's something that you want to get your students to think about. You know, you could also bring in the idea that you decided to become a teacher when you tutored your first student, or you decided to become a teacher or pursue teaching when you actually got to graduate school. Whatever the timeline is, maybe teach from your own personal experience so that it adds credibility, right? Because you are actually a teacher, and hopefully you love being a teacher. But it also offers students a visual, right? It does a lot. And then what you have gained from your involvement. So that's a very important statement, that you are not just, again, entering things or beginning things just to list them on your resume, but there's some learning involved from your involvement, right? So what is your intended major? Discuss how your interest in the subject developed, and describe any experience you have had in the field, such as volunteer work, internships and employment, participation in student organizations and activities, and what you have gained from your involvement. So usually I create the annotated bibliography at the beginning of the course as assignment, and there is an accompanying lecture and assignment sheet lecture for that annotated bibliography. And I usually create them, the bibliography and personal statement, 50 points each, because they both represent total 100 5-point assignment, right? So the 5 points would be introduce yourself and your intended major, use the university's wording, meaning that we want to get students into an understanding of tailoring, right? Tailoring to a specific audience. For example, you have some institutions and departments that will give you a bachelor's of science in business administration with a specialization in accounting. And then you have some academic programs and institutions that offer a bachelor's of business administration in business administration with a specialization in accounting. And then you have some institutions and programs with a bachelor's of arts in business administration with a specialization in accounting. And the reason why it's important to teach that, because once that application leaves the admissions office, the transcript evaluator, and the registrar, any other admissions staff member, and goes to the actual academic department or school first, and then the academic department, you want to teach students how to tailor that application so that it goes to the right department. Because especially in business, they have individual departments: accounting, finance, international business, nonprofit management, etc. And students need to understand that tailoring the application really ensures that that particular person's statement gets to the right admissions committee, faculty, department, etc. So those first 5 points are very important. And then the body paragraphs represent 40. So discuss and describe your interest in the subject and your experience in the field. Base your discussion on the sample personal statement discussed in class. The link is available on eCampus. And so not only do I teach the personal statement lecture, I also teach the personal statement itself as a sample, and those discussions are available throughout the class. And the personal statement, I usually teach it along with the annotated bibliography lecture about 2 to 3 weeks, the first 2 to 3 weeks. And so that gives students enough time to get acclimated to the writing environment, the college writing environment, get acclimated to working in groups, learn outlining, learn all different types of things specific to the first year composition course. Then, of course, the conclusion is conclude your discussion detailing what you have gained from your involvement in the field. And that's basically 5 points. So you understand, so students understand then that much is more is done in the body paragraphs, because that's where the student has to persuade the admissions committee. And if you create this assignment, this gives them an opportunity to get feedback on their personal statement in an instructional academic environment. And then it gives them 2 years to work on this same personal statement for when they desire to plan. So it has its advantages. It gives you an opportunity to gauge their writing readiness and their willingness to research beyond the high school level. It gives you an opportunity to gauge their sentence construction. It gives you an opportunity to gauge how well they present an argument, right? Because if the argument is your major is electrical engineering, but you've had no involvement to date in 2 years, not through coursework, not through volunteer work, intern work, or something like that, then how persuasive are you to the person reading the personal statement, your personal statement, that this is the field you really want to get into? But when your anchor is a teacher, and you've been a tutor, you've had a tutoring service, you've done some volunteer tutoring, you have helped other people with their personal statements. You've been an academic writing tutor at a center. You've done many more things related to your anchor, then that's much more persuasive than a person who has not. And so teaching the personal statement gives you that opportunity as a composition instructor to really look at their writing, because you need to know how they think and how they write and how they frame an argument. Even if this is not the true argument paper, you still need to know how they do that prior to the next assignment that's going to have even more stakes. So this is the rubric. And then, of course, this is worth 50 points. Students have X amount of time to complete this assignment. There's always a due date attached to it. And then there are directions about how the document should be double spaced, formatted for MLA, because this is an English class. And then late papers are accepted with the deduction. You get to determine what that deduction is based upon your goals for the course and that assignment. So here's the plagiarism statement. Academic honesty is key. Please avoid plagiarizing work. This is not a collaborative assignment. Refer to the course syllabus for more information about plagiarizing and the consequences of cheating and colluding. And we always add a plagiarism statement to our English assignment sheets, just as part of educational policy. But I also want to make a note that students oftentimes will try to get a sample personal statement and maybe change wording, change some things with that sample personal statement, and then pass it off as their own. Well, it hurts their process, their learning process, because they didn't manage the task appropriately. And then students forget or don't understand that they all each have a writing signature. And I tell my students all the time, by that first or second paper, I just about know how you write. I can look at your tone. I can look at how you form your sentences. I can almost hear you talk through the writing itself. And so there's no sense in you plagiarizing the work. Just ask for help. So you will often get students who want to collaborate when this is not a collaborative assignment, meaning that you're working together. There are some assignments that you can work together, and then there are some assignments that require you to write individually. So taking some time to explain plagiarism statement, making sure that it is a reference and that it is referenced in your syllabus will protect you when it comes to grading and offering feedback. So adding a plagiarism statement to the actual English assignment sheet should help students to understand just how important it is. All right, so after going through the elements of the English assignment sheet, let's look at some instructional strategies necessary at the pre-writing stages. And so this is focusing primarily on engaging the students in a group discussion on this topic, as well as separating the students into peer groups so they can engage each other. All of this is geared towards, again, just testing or gauging the students' readiness, not only for researching and writing, but group discussion in this regard. So these are your pre-writing stages: task management, outlining, and group discussion. So let's look at task management. And this is important for you as the instructor to manage the time in the course. And the lecture itself could run maybe 1 to 2 weeks. But if you are conducting your first group discussion, you want to manage your time within the time allotted in the classroom. So consider this this part of the process, the first 45 minutes of the course, if it is a 55-minute course, or it could be an hour and 20 minutes, right? So your first 15 minutes, that's getting students to reflect and write individual responses to questions posed by you as the composition instructor. So any questions that you would have them to respond to, and we're going to go over them. 15 to 20 minutes switching papers, students discussing answers with their respective peer. 15 to 20 minutes, a follow-up board discussion by the composition instructor, creating the visual, answering any questions. So this is roughly a 45-minute exercise for a 55-minute course. Once you have decided how you're going to manage the task in terms of time management, it's time to now think about group formation. And you don't necessarily have to pick students individually. You can have students form their own groups, right? Just to see how they engage each other, who they sort of feel connected to. Sometimes students will form a group based upon the students who are who are near them. That's fine as well. And then later in the course, you could always create individual groups according to your choices. But for group formation, put students into groups of 2 to 3, not to exceed 4 for task management purposes, because you want to be able to get them. You want each person within a group to be able to have his or her 5 minutes to discuss their questions, discuss any sort of outlining or any feedback, right? So putting too many students in one group would affect the learning process. They must face each other or position their desks into a group formation. The purpose of this peer group strategy is to get students to engage each other and introduce themselves and talk. That's why the personal statement lecture is a very useful lecture, because it gives you sort of like a practice in terms of putting students together, giving students feedback, assessing their writing, assessing their contribution, just assessing their readiness for college level work. So these are the questions that you might pose to the students. Put these on the board, and this will give them an opportunity to create responses, individual responses, and then discuss those responses with their peers. So what are your unique qualities? What are your academic goals? What are your professional goals? You could present these as vertical questions, or you could position these questions into columns with the keywords being unique qualities, academic goals, professional goals, right? And this gives them a visual on the board. This gives them a way to outline, right? Not just creating a sentence format, but maybe like a listing of something to think about. So after you have posed those questions, then you want to have students write their responses individually first before they discuss those responses with their peers. So give students 5 minutes to outline their unique qualities. Give students 5 minutes to outline their academic goals. Give students 5 minutes to outline their professional goals. So this really should take about 15 minutes for students to complete individually. And you've already posed the questions on the board, either just vertically or horizontally in corresponding columns. And then the onus is on them to now create a response, a short response to it. Remember, sometimes students do not always know who they are. This happens a lot. When you pose a question like this, sometimes you may have a few students who know exactly who they are and what their unique qualities are. They may have done some sort of self-reflection, regardless of age. And people would definitely, students would definitely understand what their academic goals are, at least to graduate with a college degree. Even if they put that, it's broad because they're not focusing in on a major. I want to graduate with a bachelor's of science or bachelor's of arts in this, right? So the fact that they don't create a specific response is a feedback opportunity. And then of course, professional goals, it may be implied that if your major is accounting, you want to become an accountant, or your major is engineering and you want to become an engineer. That may be implied that is your professional goal. You want to work as an engineer or an accountant or as a teacher in those particular fields. But professional goals could also mean later, when they discover more about themselves, that they might want to become an entrepreneur. They might want to become a vice president, a president of a company, a CEO of a company, or something like that. But no matter what, it gives you an opportunity to gauge where they think they want to take themselves, where they think they believe they are, and also gives it provides you with a feedback opportunity to encourage them in a direction. So this should take, give or take, 15 minutes for students to complete individually, because the give or take aspect of it is how much do students know each other. I mean, know themselves individually before they can then offer advice. And as they get into group formation and offer feedback to other students, they're going to find or discover that there are some gaps in their knowledge base or gaps in their understanding about things, but as they are encouraging and providing feedback for someone else, they close those gaps as well. So this should take about 15 minutes. So then if we are outlining individual, a person could think about, and these are like examples. So what are your unique qualities and events? So you are a detail-oriented person, conscientious, organized. You might have had a personal experience with death as a personal event. And then you may bring in events like when you volunteered at a hospital or volunteered for a food drive or something like that. And then you sort of connect it, or have students teach students how to connect it to their anchor, which is to become X, right? So then their goals would be, you're asking students what their goals are. And that goal, what are your goals? Academic, professional, and personal. Some people want to be married, right? And then the vision is, you might write this sentence on the board: I want to become. And you'd be surprised how hard it is to end that sentence, to provide an answer to that sentence. I don't know how some students might feel afraid to say what they really want to become for a number of reasons, right? But it's something in terms of getting students to think about the larger vision of who they want to become is a very good strategy. And then getting them to write about that is a good writing strategy. And then of course the mission would be to exercise self-control. And a lot of people don't understand that. Sometimes composition instructors don't understand that. That in order for us to get to the vision, we're going to have to exercise self-control. So this is just examples of what you can get students to think about. So then the group discussion, which would be peer feedback, would be 15 to 20 minutes. So students will switch the papers. Each student reads the answers of their peer. Each student takes 5 minutes to explain their answers and engage further in their respective discussions. And then each student can ask questions and or offer suggestions about their qualities and academic professional goals. Now, this could take a little longer depending on the timing of each student, so it's up to you to manage. You could always allow for 20-25 minutes for this part of the course, especially if you are in an hour and 20 minutes. I like to try to keep it, if it's a 55-minute course that meets 3 times a week, I would like to keep it within that first 45 minutes, and I leave 10 minutes just in case there are other questions, students may have to ask about the course itself. But the first, I would prefer trying to do all of this within the first 45 minutes to get it over with. And then the second meeting, you could always reflect on what you did in the previous course date, right? So try to do as much as you can within that 1-day course, that Monday course. Say it meets Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 55 minutes. Try to do what you can in that Monday course meeting, because it gives you an opportunity to see how well you manage your time and manage the students' time within that 45 minute time frame, right? There will be some activities that will have to spill over to a second day or a third day. That's fine. But you want to know how well you can manage this type of activity with students engaging each other in 3 to 4 member groups within 45 minutes. If this is a course that meets for 55 minutes for 3 days, or if it's a course that meets an hour and 20 minutes, you're definitely going to have plenty of time. A course that meets hour and 20 minutes for 2 days. So then the group discussion, instructor feedback, 15 to 20 minutes. So the composition instructor may choose 1 or 2 peer groups to begin a board discussion, asking questions and getting other students involved in the process. The composition instructor may draw a 3-column visual with unique qualities, personal events, and goals in their respective columns. This supports visual learning objectives, and this can also be done pre-group discussion. And then the composition instructor may advise students to begin the process of outlining their personal statement based on the writing prompt and lecture, considering time management. So what you are teaching them about time management is something that they should receive and accept like a sponge and apply on their own individually at home. You could pose it as questions, as I noted, or you could draw a 3-column visual and place these individual phrasing and words in each of the columns and conduct a discussion. If you do something like that, if you do it as a pre-group discussion, you would have to add about 5 to 10 minutes to your time management, because it could take some time. You could have students who tend to speak a lot in class, and then you can try to pull at a student who doesn't speak a lot in class, and then there's time spent in trying to do that. So if you do it as a pre-group discussion, apart from the questions already posed, then you could expect to add about 5 to 10 more minutes to your 45-minute total. So do keep that in mind. All right, so here is a sample visual used during the board discussion. And just remember again that if you started with a pre-group discussion using the whiteboard, then remember that you would have to add 5 to 10 more minutes just to take into account any issues with a particular student who might want to spend more time on one of the columns. But I believe that this sort of helps students organize their information. I think a grid, I think a pie chart, I think anything that allows a student to see the task visually would definitely help with any visual learning objectives that you might have for the course. Remember, we are teaching adults, and there is a such thing as adult learning styles, and we want to make sure that those students who are auditory learners get what they need. Students who are visual learners, they get what they need. And then, of course, students who like to move, kinesthetic learners, that they get what they need. And taking some time just to offer a visual or teach students how to frame content or structure content so that it is much more palatable to them based upon the topic, I think is a very good opportunity, as well as an instructional strategy. So now that you have already ushered the students through a time management task of reflecting on certain questions, thinking about the assignment sheet, the writing prompt, going through the process of peer group engagement, and then receiving feedback, as well as instructor feedback as a group objective, it's time to now encourage that student to move into self-reflection and further outlining. This is sort of like a pre-writing task, but it will definitely help the student to begin thinking about what it is that student is trying to accomplish. So this is a homework that you might want to offer the student. It's a self-reflection opportunity, and it's at the pre-writing stage. And so the personal statement requires that you understand who you are, where you have been, where you are going, and how the educational institution might help you to accomplish your goals. Now, this sentence here is part of the original topic description, but you might want to separate elements of the topic description in the same way that I did about the unique qualities, academic goals, professional goals, which are also part of the topic description. You might want to separate them as questions for students to begin thinking about individually at home. So who are you? Where have you been? Where are you going? And how will this educational institution help you to accomplish your goals? And those are questions that you could pose on the board as well, but it's something that you might use as an extra credit opportunity, right? You might use it as a way for students to do sort of like what I might deem a reading assignment or something like that for some points, however many points you want to give them. But taking some time to figure out who they are, where they have been, where they are going, and then particularly how this educational institution, not every educational institution, but how this educational institution will help them to accomplish their goals is something that they really want to consider on the journey. And it could be a feedback opportunity for you as you write a response to their pre-writing task, if you decide to create this as a pre-writing task or as a extra credit opportunity. Here is a self-reflection opportunity for you as the composition instructor. This is at the pre-instruction stage. It could be right before each lecture that you take the time to just really consider your role as a composition instructor. It could be prior to the semester where you also consider your role as a pre-instructor, a composition instructor. Because the personal statement requires students to know who they are, where they have been, where they are going, and how an educational institution will help them to accomplish their goals, they must receive instruction from an instructor possessing appropriate ethos. The same questions posed to the student can be posed to the composition instructor. Who are you as a composition instructor? Where have you been as a composition instructor? Where are you going as a composition instructor? How will this educational institution help you to accomplish your goals as a composition instructor? These questions are key for first-year composition instructors because we get students who are in transition from high school to college, or from high school to the four-year university environment or four-year college environment. And so we shape their minds when it comes to critically thinking, critically reading a literary work, writing critically on a work, interpreting that work. So we get a lot of opportunities to shape their understanding and to prepare them for the next levels. And most of the topics, however, at the first year composition stages is mostly articles that may have parallel to current events, right? And when we are integrating certain supporting evidence and using the readings from a textbook, we sort of have to conform to the goals of first year composition, right? That there are a lot of things that we want to cover, but we can't always cover because of the time limits, the boundaries that are set by the departments, the English department, or any other type of department, as well as educational policy, and as well as state policies, rules, laws, and then accreditation. So we have to take all of that into consideration when we stand before students as the composition instructor. We also have to consider that as we prepare through graduate school, but we don't get that understanding unless we are in a teaching of writing course at the graduate level, we usually have to teach ourselves how to teach or deliver instruction. And so sometimes we don't always get what we need in the graduate classroom. We don't always get what we need as a graduate teaching associate assigned to our own classrooms. And sometimes we don't get what we need with an assigned faculty supervisor, right? Because we are used to or accustomed to learning how knowledge is poured into us versus how we need to engage. And usually at the community college level, there are many more assignments, writing assignments, and then there's much more engagement because we are trying to retain the student. Whereas at the university level or four-year college level, it is more delivery of instruction versus engagement from the student. And so those are some of the things that you have to think about when you are considering becoming a composition instructor. So then who are you as a composition instructor? You gauge that by how many years you have spent teaching composition. You may not be able to gauge your effectiveness earlier than that because you don't have a record of successes or record of completion. I mean, you could easily gauge whether or not you are effective after one academic year. That's always possible. But sometimes you don't know your gaps until you have taught many more years. And then you realize there are some things you just didn't know and that you're going to have to learn again or relearn or learn for the first time. And so you want to think about who you are as a composition instructor based upon your own learning process, because how you learn sometimes is based upon, how you teach is based upon how you learn. If you are very skilled at just knowing enough, you're probably going to teach students just knowing enough. I remember I had an instructor, not a composition instructor, but a Spanish, ninth grade Spanish, I think. And he never spoke a lick of Spanish. He never taught from the board. He just sat at his desk. He gave us the books, told us to do the problem set and look at the answers at the back of the book. Look at the back of the book for the answers. And so that stayed with me. It bothered me. And even to this day, I try to base most of my preparation on ensuring students get what they need from me as their composition instructor, and not the just enough or give them something just for them to pass or something like that. But I actually want them to think and critically think and be concerned about their knowledge and how they gather knowledge and how they interpret knowledge and how important it is for them to apply knowledge appropriately. But then I got a 10th grade math teacher, I think geometry, and she was a teacher's teacher. She taught from the board. She explained math. She was very sassy, very respectful. She called on us. We had to learn it. She was not, she had the expectation for us that we had to learn it and we had to grow and we had to continue and sustain that understanding in the course. Now, I'm not saying I became a geometry expert or anything like that, but I moved from one learning process to another learning process and really actually improved and made A's on some of my tests. And so to her credit, she demonstrated the patience for learning, and then also she demonstrated the patience for delivering instruction, right? So then when you think about yourself as a composition instructor, understanding that there are some people who are just not ready to learn, and then there are some people who are very eager to learn, and then there are other people who are indifferent to learning, and you got all these different learning styles within your classroom of 25 students. If you're at the community college level, if you are teaching high school, it's going to be much more than that. And you have to have the patience for everyone's learning processes. I understand that there's certain knowledge that people are just going to have to come up to a standard. There's a certain standard. And that sometimes you can't wait because they have to meet that standard. They have to know it. But you may be able to wait or be patient with your instruction in other areas. When I realized students in my course were having trouble with the previous assignment on the grit essay, and we just didn't have time to get to the next set of lectures, I went on ahead and just decided to X those lectures. It was going to be module 3, comparison and contrast. And instead, I created an essay prompt, how do you learn? And that's where that essay prompt comes from, and that's where the study comes from me thinking about, let's gauge what you just learned from the previous lecture and gauge what you need to learn, or what learning strategies you need to adopt going forward. And the students, and they had to actually write a whole essay on it, as if they were still going to write the true essay. And it turned out to be such a useful exercise for them because they never gauged their learning. They never even thought to think about it like that. And that gave me some data and information to think about as well. So who are you as a composition instructor? Where have you been as a composition instructor? I think that speaks to timeline. You can always go back into your own exposure to English and writing and what you learned prior to teaching composition instructor as a college instructor, or as a AP English instructor, or just a high school instructor. But where have you been? And that takes really significant reflection. Where are you going as a composition instructor? So where do you want to take your progress as an instructor, as a composition instructor? Where do you think you are headed? I would like to focus on feedback and assessment because I don't like rubrics or the standards-based, the standardized test type rubrics in the composition classroom. I think we can have rubrics as a guide to ensure that we are providing feedback to students, but I don't think that the rubrics used within the composition classroom that is wholly dependent upon you understanding the content, meaning that you would have to study, right, versus training for a standardized test. I don't like the standardized test rubrics within the classroom. So feedback and assessment is something that I'm considering. I have like a large library of scholarship articles and books on feedback and assessment, and so that's something that I think I might want to create an annotated bibliography, an audio lecture, multiple audio lectures on each source, and just kind of go over that information. And that gives me an opportunity to really think about where I want to take my learning progress as a composition instructor. And then how will this educational institution help you to accomplish your goals as a composition instructor? Well, I have come to understand that even though I received training, not necessarily training, but I got an opportunity to teach as a graduate student, and of course I've tutored, I feel like as an adjunct, I've actually received training. And I spent 8 years at my previous institution, and I felt, and somewhere maybe in the 6th, 7th year, maybe earlier than that, I realized it felt like a training institute. And so sometimes there are certain educational institutions that will function better as a training ground for you because maybe you didn't get what you needed while you were a graduate student, or you didn't know if you needed that. Sometimes you just don't know. Sometimes you can know that you want to become a teacher, but really don't know that certain preparation is needed. And so one educational institution can be the type of institution that just trains you. You take professional development courses. You are part of the system in some kind of way through committee work, you attend events, you attend meetings, and you learn what you need to learn for that season, that training and preparation season. But then another educational institution can be the type of institution that gives you a full-time job, and you develop a stronger commitment to not only the school, the institution, and of course yourself, but also to the field, that you are now fully engaging the field as a professional. And so then you have to think about what kinds of goals you want to set, what kinds of goals you believe are achievable, and how long you want to stay at that educational institution so that you can meet your goals as a composition instructor. So it just depends on what your goals are and what your understanding is. That's why it's important to do a self-reflection opportunity. Of course, you can do this pre-instruction, but you may not always know what it is you want to do until you actually get your feet in the water, right? Pardon the cliche. But these are some questions to think about before each semester, during the semester, before you take on the role as a composition instructor. These are some things you should think about.